So, welcome everyone who's joined us today from all over Asia and Europe for this webinar on technology in futures thinking. This is organised in partnership with the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies and the Development Academy of the Philippines, this webinar series. My name is Freya Chow-Paul and I lead the youth projects here at the Asia Europe Foundation. And today I have the pleasure of guiding us through today's session. At this point, let me give you a quick rundown of what we have prepared for you. I'll begin with a short introduction before handing over to our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Marga Gual-Soler. And this will be followed by a panel discussion and Q&A with two additional expert speakers who are really excited to share their insights and perspectives on technology and futures thinking with you all from Asia and Europe. A reminder that for the Q&A session, you will have the opportunity to share your thoughts and you can ask your questions in the Q&A function on your Zoom panel. You can pose questions, upvote any of the ones that you find interesting, or even reply to them and engage in a discussion. I can already see that a number of you are posting in the chat where you're joining from today, so we encourage you to do this as well, share where you're logging in from. And without further ado, I think we can get started on the introduction. So a little bit about the context of this session. As many of you know, ASEF, we're an intergovernmental organisation working to strengthen mutual understanding between Asia and Europe. And we do this across different thematic areas. We bring together a variety of governmental and civil society stakeholders to further strengthen the connectivity and opportunities for collaboration to solve global challenges between the regions. And our flagship project, the ASEF Young Leaders Summit, is a leadership development program for young leaders across Asia and Europe to learn, exchange, and connect with each other. And this session today is part of this year's ASEFYLS Capacity Training 2026, which we have 95 selected young leaders, and we're very happy to open up today's session also to a wider audience of young leaders. So happy to see many of you joining us here today. And at ASEF, this topic of anticipatory leadership for a human-centered future, it's a brand new topic for us this year, and it really focuses on how we can prepare young people for the kind of leadership that is needed for a more human-centered society. And for young leaders to be able to use future-oriented tools to guide present-day decisions. So today's session really aims to give you all food for thought and inspiration that we hope you take beyond the session for deeper discussions with your peers. And you'll know that throughout this webinar series, we've brought together a wide range of expert speakers from different backgrounds to share with you their insights. We've touched on a number of different topics already, what it means to have an anticipatory leadership mindset. We've talked a bit about systems thinking, future thinking tools, and the application of it. And today's session, we're excited to focus on technology and futures thinking, technology and AI, and how this big mega trend of digital transformation and technologies is affecting the future and looks like in the future, but also how it can be explored and used also as a tool in futures thinking and foresight. So with that, I think we're ready for the first full proper segment of today's session. For the first keynote presentation, we welcome Dr. Marga Gual-Soler. Let me add you onto the screen, Marga. Dr. Marga Gual-Soler is an internationally recognized thought leader at the intersection of science, technology, and global affairs, with over 15 years of experience shaping national and international science diplomacy strategies. She has worked across academia, governments, and international organizations to strengthen anticipatory governance of emerging science and technology. She currently serves as Executive Director of Capacity and Leadership at the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, GESDA. And if those of you who were able to join our webinar a couple of weeks ago on Anticipatory Leadership Mindset, you would have met Marga's colleague, Marianne, then. Marga is also the Program Director of the Geneva Science Diplomacy Week, which I think took place a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where she pioneers experiential learning frameworks, including immersive simulation games to train leaders in anticipatory leadership. She also previously built the first global science diplomacy curriculum at the AAAS Center for Science Diplomacy and helped rebuild US-Cuba scientific collaboration. In 2019, she joined the largest Women in Science expedition to Antarctica, and in 2020, she was recognized as a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. Thank you so much for joining us today, Margaret, and we really look forward to hearing your presentation. I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Freya, and thank you very much, ASEF, for inviting Jezda to this session today. And I'm really pleased to continue our collaboration. ASEF and Jezda share very similar ambitions to bring together countries across geographies through youth leadership and science and technology diplomacy. So we were pleased to already collaborate with ASEF in the Science and Technology Diplomacy program. Last year, we met many of the fellows in Copenhagen in December, and now we are also equally excited to continue and expand our partnership in anticipatory leadership development. So I'm really looking forward to the session today, learning from everyone, and I hope this can be interactive. So please continue introducing yourselves and asking questions or comments in the chat. And so you already met. I have the advantage of not coming from scratch here, because you met my colleague, Dr. Marianne Schorling, who's our lead in anticipation experience, Jezda. And so she already introduced a little bit Jezda and the anticipatory mindset that we are trying to advance. But today I'll give you some more frameworks and a little bit more of the context and the vision that we have for how anticipatory leadership and science and technology futures come together. So please feel free to, again, come in, ask questions in the chat, and hopefully this can be lively and interactive session. So I just want to make sure my PowerPoint is visible, and if I get a thumbs up, wonderful. And so we're going to bring together the concept of anticipatory leadership and the practice with science and technology, and try to make the case for how science and technology advances are an essential part of the leadership of the future, and an essential component of the skill sets and the tool sets and the mindsets that every leader should have. So all of the leaders in the room hopefully can really start bringing and connecting those worlds. You've already done this for many weeks in the program, so today hopefully reinforces that. Before we dive into it, I just want to say a brief word of intro about Jezda for those of you who might not know or remember from my colleague. Jezda is a Swiss foundation. We are a public-private partnership, Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, and we were created in 2019 by the Swiss Confederation, so the government of Switzerland, and also the city and the canton of Geneva. And I will say more later about why we are in Geneva specifically. And the idea is to anticipate the future of science and then mobilize the diplomacy, governance, but also private sector and society ecosystems to ensure we derive the maximum possible benefit from science, from those science futures, and we minimize or mitigate any risks or any consequences, unwanted consequences we want to avoid. And so the way we do this is through science anticipation. And so by projecting ourselves into the future of science or possible futures of science, we can already see how science will transform the way we are, the way we live, the way we live together, the way we interact with our planet. And so this allows us to, so seeing that future and seeing what's coming tomorrow allows us to start acting today, and to make sure what we see in the future materializes in the best possible way and minimizes the chance of inequalities, divides, or other problems that often come when we react to science and technology rather than proactively shape it and together collectively decide and design how to best deploy it into our societies. And this is what we call the window of anticipation. I will say more about this concept, but essentially it's about the time that we can, that our society needs to prepare for changes in a way that are not disruptive, the way that we can transition all together collectively in agreement of how this future should be and look like for the benefit of people, society, and the planet. And so our instrument of anticipation, our main tool, is called the JESDA Science Breakthrough Radar. And it's this little yellow, colorful book that you see pictured in the slide, and also this wheel that looks like a radar with several colorful dots, right? So these dots represent each of them a transformative field of science that experts are thinking or anticipating or expecting that is going to have consequential impacts and transformative impacts for the future of humanity, right? For example, you can see here one that I have highlighted that's called advanced AI. So the way the radar is structured in these 40-something dots, it's clustered across what we call thematic platforms. So the first one is quantum, AI, digital technologies. Second one is about biotech, human augmentation, neurotechnology, synthetic biology, genomics, so kind of the health and biotech space. The third platform is about planet, climate, eco-regeneration, geoengineering. How are we intervening in our planet in order to, for example, save species for extinction or tackle climate change? So what are the decarbonization technologies, for instance? The fourth platform is about social sciences, because it's very important when we talk about science that we don't only think about natural sciences or technology or engineering, but we think about anticipating the future of science as a whole, and that means also social sciences, such as the future of geopolitics, the future of democracy, all of these societal transitions that are also subject of academic and scientific study. And the fifth one is knowledge foundation. So essentially how the fabric of knowledge is going to change itself. For example, when we introduce AI as a driver of scientific research, how does that change the fundamental way we generate and disseminate knowledge? And so the foundation of our knowledge systems themselves. And so this radar is really what we would call kind of a summary for policymakers. Is not a jargon, long paper or text that is intended for scientific audience. Is really intended for all the rest of sectors and communities. It's intended for policymakers, for diplomats, for business leaders, for people who are busy and don't really have time to read through, entire reports and entire books, which is sometimes the challenge with science communication, that we, try to bring to a policymaker kind of a treaty of 300 pages on climate science, and they don't have time. So that's why, for example, instruments like IPCC exist, so you can summarize for policymakers what they need to know, and then that makes it easier to uptake into governance processes, diplomatic processes, etc. So here you see how this the very compact format of the radar is really giving you 3 short time points at 5, 10, 25 years, basically anticipating what scientists believe the future of the field is going to evolve into. So 1 paragraph per time point, so very short, very crisp, not in jargon, so it can be really widely understood by many different stakeholders, not academic, not scientific, right? So we know what scientists think is going to happen in 5, 10, 25 years. And what's really important about this format and this source of intelligence is that this is not based on published research. This is not based on papers or patents or grant applications that you can just like scrape from the internet using AI. Probably you have heard a lot of technology radars that exist. Many governments are using them, many consultancies are using them, many international organizations are using them, and that's okay. But we go 2 steps, so 1 step earlier, and one very differentiating, in a very differentiating way, is that we as scientists, human scientists, what is in their mind, what is in their lab, before they even had a chance to publish it, to write it into a grant. As we know, science can be fast, but also slow, meaning that from the time of an idea to the discovery, to the writing up the paper, those of you that are in research and academia, you know this, or you write a grant, sometimes takes years to be reviewed and accepted. Same for papers, etc. Same for patents. So if we rely only on published intelligence, we are already late. So essentially, this is the earliest possible source of intelligence going to the scientists and asking them, where do you see your field going in 5, 10, 25 years? And obviously, this is not prediction. This is not exact, because this is not, it's not evidence-based, because you cannot evidence-base the future. But you can get as close as possible to the people who are shaping that future, the people that are close to those groundbreaking discoveries and those breakthroughs, and tell them, when do you expect this breakthrough to happen? So when is generative AI going to go mainstream? And so, for example, the first radar we started in 2021 already anticipated the advent of ChatGPT. So, for example, we take topics like quantum computing. So quantum computing is a few years away. Nobody knows exactly how many years away. The point is not to be precise and to get it right in terms of how many years it's going to take for a particular breakthrough to arrive. The point is to start preparing today, because that breakthrough will come. And so if we wait until the breakthrough to be here to then start doing something about it, then we are late, such as, with what has happened with AI. That first AI was deployed into our world, into our society, our phones, our companies, our universities, our militaries. And only then we started to look into governance frameworks and ethical frameworks and red lines. And should we use it for defense purposes, yes or no? The time to discuss this is not when AI is already here. The time to discuss this was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so the same for each of these scientific dots that you see in the radar. So the radar is a human-made tool. We ask around 2,400 scientists, around 90 countries each year. It is a rolling anticipation tool, meaning that every year it gets updated. Of course, as science advances, we can update those expectations that scientists have. So we follow them in a way. And the idea is that we put together this radar, this book, which is also a website that you can, interactive website, to inform anticipatory governance of emerging science, processes such as the UN system, national governments, but also to inform private sector, companies, startups. Where are these opportunities to, create new startups? And also society. How can we prepare society for those transitions? Instead of kind of throwing something on people and then, wondering why they are resistant or reluctant. So if you think about COVID, when we had mRNA vaccines were tested in clinical trials for safety for more than 10 years, but society didn't know that. So we kind of, woke up one day and we had a new technology, a new vaccine, and people were reluctant and suspicious. Why are we now, in 3 months having this super high-tech technology overnight? So it was not overnight. It was really already tested for safety, for clinical trials, but society didn't know that. So how do we help society go along with breakthroughs so it doesn't kind of have the backlash or, a lot of the conspiracy theories that came out when we think that the technology has been kind of thrown on us out of the blue, out of nothing. And the last point about the radar I want to make is about it is not foresight in the way that we don't, in the radar itself, design scenarios, and we are not prescriptive, and we're not telling any government or anyone this is good or bad, or you should follow this, or you should invest in this and that. So JESDA is an honest broker, and we want the radar to also be a tool for others to take the decisions. We are not prescribing any decisions. We are not, in this sense, giving policy advice. We make this information available to the multilateral system for the decision makers to take those decisions. And so these are not hypothetical, imaginary scenarios, because they are in the pipeline of discovery already. So these are real experiments being done in real labs. So it's not something that we just imagine. It really has that origin in research that's being done today. And here you can see some of the dots. I already mentioned AI, quantum, but also synthetic biology, engineering, life and ecosystems, orbital environment, future of space research. So really a broad swath of scientific fields, as you can see. And so this looks like, something like very short, just showing you 5, 10, 25 years. For example, in neurotechnology, just to pick one, in 5 years, we could have next generation implants that are inserted in our brain, and they can allow us to, for example, address some massive burden of disease such as Alzheimer, dementia, Parkinson, right? This is a very good thing that we would be able, it's already happening, so we would be able to deploy at scale such therapies. However, by having a brain implant inside your brain that is possibly powered by AI, you can imagine the perhaps not so positive consequences that this could have. And sort of a lot of governance and ethical human rights questions come into play, and they need to be addressed at the same time as the science advances, not afterwards, not once the technology is already out there. So we need to start thinking about this today. And so as the brain-computer interfaces, just to give you this example, move from a clinical setting to a consumer market, and they escape some of these regulations that are very tightly controlled in clinical research, we need to think about those potential impacts, those potential consequences before the technology is already on the market and anyone can access it. And also even thinking about anyone can access it, the questions of equity. How many of those advanced technologies are going to be available to the world, or are going to be only available to a few governments, a few companies are developing them, and therefore thinking about sharing of technology, patents, and IP. How are we going to deploy this equitably so everyone can benefit, right? So all of these questions come into play, from science anticipation to then what becomes science diplomacy and anticipatory science diplomacy, anticipatory governance, and the process and the skills that we need to follow this sequence is what we call anticipatory leadership. And so another example I give you, synthetic biology. Now we can create genomes and cells from artificially in the lab, right? So this is great because we could sequence genomes much cheaper. We could come up with gene therapies, and we could replace perhaps genes that are mutated, and so huge therapeutic potential. But at the same time, perhaps, for example, gene editing tools allow us to create new bioweapons, and the democratization of such as biotechnology tools means anyone can get access, and anyone, maybe bad actors, can get access to it. So is this a good thing? How do we prevent with AI and with this kind of lowering the cost of access to biotechnology, how do we prevent those to fall in wrong hands, for example, right? So this is, again, the need for thinking about these uses and these applications way before the technology has arrived. And so this is what we call the window of anticipation. The moment, the distance or the time where from the moment we know that a discovery is in the making and the moment it arrives. And this allows us typically a few years, right? And these few years is really the only time we have to think about it collectively, to have a multilateral governance, to have a consensus, international cooperation on how are we going to best deploy and steer this technology and accelerate the governance discussion at the same time that we accelerate the science and make sure that we don't lock ourselves into an irreversible pathway, which I think with AI, we are locked into an irreversible pathway. And we can discuss this later, but could we reverse where we are now with AI? Probably not. So this is the idea for all of these fields of science that I've shown you on the radar. And so back to Geneva, I said why we're in Geneva is very important, because Geneva is the center, the hub of multilateral governance, the seat of the European headquarters of the UN, but also the host of many international organizations, the host of more than 750 NGOs, the host of 2,000 multinational companies, and all of the countries, all of the member states represented with an embassy or a mission. So 190 something countries are represented in Geneva. So in a very small city, in a very small place, we can access all of these communities and all of these stakeholders to bring this science anticipation into the multilateral system. And just that sits outside of the government, outside of the IGOs. So we are really kind of this boundary space, boundary platform that can act as honest broker to bring these conversations together. So if you want to learn more about kind of the framework and the academic underpinning to everything I'm telling you today, we can share this paper, and maybe Freya, we can share it later, about the framework, anticipatory science diplomacy framework, that really describes these steps. How do you go from science anticipation to convening the different stakeholders in a neutral honest broker process to catalyze this multilateral global action, so to make sure that those scientific breakthroughs benefit everyone, nobody's left behind. And we work with countries that mostly, global South countries that wouldn't necessarily be at the forefront of these technologies, but they can start thinking about capacity building governance. For example, Philippines, and we've done quite a bit of work, quantum in Philippines, right? So it's really looking at how countries can get at the same level, same pace, and the most advanced ones, to make sure there will be no gaps, because if we already faced the digital divide in the beginning of the internet, now we face an even bigger gap with AI. So with quantum computing, the gap can widen even more. So with the acceleration of technology, we need this kind of new leadership where everyone can be kind of fluent in this science and technology anticipation, because there will be no sector or aspect of society will be untouched by these advances. And so I just and this is the part I work on, and Marianne, who you met last month, also works with me, is in capacity building. How do we translate all of this into pedagogical frameworks and tools? And so this is where the anticipatory leadership framework comes in. And so the idea is to bring together all of the communities that have a stake in this, so governments, international organizations, the researchers that are developing these technologies, but also industry, because as you know, deep tech and startups are now big tech, small tech, all of the techs have now, and as you've seen this in many of the ASEF programs before, that the technology companies are becoming more powerful diplomatic actors than states themselves. So we need to include tech diplomacy, we need to include tech companies and industry actors at the same level and at the same table as the in governments or intergovernmental processes for governance, right? And so the idea is to bring this anticipatory mindset that is informed by science and technology anticipation, so we can collectively shift governance from reactive, as we've had until now, to proactive. And that means that governance can keep pace at the same speed, and not 5 years later, 20, how many UN agreements, that took decades, right? That 5 years, 10 years, some of them 20 years. It's impossible to the science that went in when that negotiation started is not the science that is 20 years later. So we really need to find ways to make this much more agile, right? And ensure all countries can benefit from these advances, and not just a few. So the last word I will say in terms of how we think about these pedagogical tools, it's all about experiential learning. We have simulation games that we develop on all of these JESDA radar dots. Last year we did a wonderful one in the previous ASEC Science and Technology Diplomacy program with quantum diplomacy game. And so the idea is that these games allows us to rehearse the future of governance in the present, so we can kind of play and we can be creative and expand the options of what could be possible. We can expand the table of multilateralism, which actors should be there that are not present in the traditional multilateralism, such as private sectors, such as universities, such as civil society, right? And then how can we compress that into 2 or 3 hours? So these are the anticipatory science diplomacy experiences, which we will be very happy to share more about it. And the idea is because you're going to be talking about foresight and some of these methodologies later, or you've already done. It's a backcasting scenario where we see a crisis and then we try to walk back to the present and redesign the future in a different way once we have seen that the current trajectory will lead us to a crisis or inequalities or a future that we do not want. And so last word I'll say is that by doing this kind of games and simulations and role plays is not just about play. It really has application in the real world. So we can see how now a lot of our partners, and especially the multilateral partners, are taking up these exercises for real policy design, right? So we can see the real world impact of these fictionalized scenarios, and as a way to come up with new models that perhaps in the official process they were too constrained to think about. And so this really opens the imagination and the creativity to think about new models and new ways of operationalizing this anticipatory governance. So you can see here we've worked with Human Rights Council, we've worked with the G20, the UN Security Council. We even created our own anticipatory science diplomacy mechanism, which is the Open Quantum Institute in Geneva, to think about the governance of quantum once quantum arrives. How can we make sure its applications benefit everyone? And so these are some examples, and in a nutshell, the idea I would like to leave you today is that anticipation is essential for the future of multilateralism, especially at the moment that the UN is under such pressure, and all of the multilateral institutions are feeling, the challenges of a evolving world order. And so anticipatory science diplomacy and anticipatory leadership are these tools that we have to ensure we keep a proactive approach and not wait until technology arrives and kind of runs us over, and then we have to come up with governance after it's too late. And so here's where we see this theory of change of multilateral system, which is based on states, it's reactive, it's slow, siloed, right, based on process, on bureaucracy, and driven by challenges. And we see anticipation bringing this opportunity-based, not just risks, flexibility, evidence, and science-based, much more multi-stakeholder and inclusive than and impact-oriented, not process-oriented. So all of these features we hope to bring into the multilateral system. And because we are in Geneva, we are very lucky to work very closely with all of these actors, but others such as ASEF, so really all of the multilateral institutions anywhere in the world, and the Europe-Asia link and the bridge is perhaps more important than ever, as the transatlantic dynamic shifts quite dramatically. I think it's also important to make sure we look at all of the other sides of the world, and we strengthen those bridges. So if you're interested in learning more, those of you who are maybe around Europe or Geneva, or you can of course travel from anywhere, you are to join us for our summit. The JESDA Summit is where we present the radar every year, the updates, and then all of these communities come together. So you can find out a lot more in Geneva if you want to join us at the JESDA Summit mid of October. So also Freya, we can make sure they receive the information and the link later. So with that, I thank you so much for the opportunity to address you today, and I look forward to the discussion and to my fellow speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margot. So lovely to hear, and for you to share all of these things about the breakthrough radar, especially, I think. But we've also heard a lot of keywords that have come up through the program so far. Of, what does it mean to have an agile mindset and be responsive already for young people to ensure their organizations, their youth and student organizations, are transforming and adapting to the different trends that are happening as we see. We'll come more to this, but let's move on to our panel discussion. So Margaret, I will keep you on the screen with me and just pop my slide back up so we can bring in our panelists for today. So allow me to introduce them. Let me add in and bring in Rodrigo Fernandez Garcia, who's an anthropologist focused on how societies can prepare for more sustainable and inclusive futures. He combines systems thinking and interdisciplinary analysis to address complex social challenges, bridging rich social theory with practical action. Rodrigo has worked on social innovation and capacity building projects in Spain across social, academic, and private sectors, and also directs and produces ethnographic documentaries that highlight stories of social impact and transformation. He holds degrees in social communication, anthropology, and international development and project management, and is joining us from the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. Colleagues of his you will have seen in some of the other sessions. But I will just acknowledge at this stage that Rodrigo's Wi-Fi might be a little touch and go here today because he's joining us from Burkina Faso currently. So we will try our best to keep Rodrigo in the session smooth, which is a funny note while we talk on a session on technology, of course, because we have to remember these dependencies. And next up, let me introduce Dr. Jody Salas, who is an Associate Director at Accenture Philippines and co-founder of the Raza Consulting Group, with over 20 years of IT experience across sectors such as education, energy, pharmaceuticals, consumer products, and the public sector. He's also served on the board of directors of Hewlett-Packard Philippines Employees Cooperative and the board of trustees of the Philippine Society for Talent Development. Dr. Jody holds a bachelor's degree in Library and Information Science from the University of the Philippines, an MBA from Ateneo de Manila University, a Doctor of Public Administration from UP NCPAG, and a Doctor of Business Administration in Emerging Technologies from Golden Gate University in San Francisco. He's also a Professor of Practice at Golden Gate University, the University of the Philippines, and the Development Academy of the Philippines, one of our partner organizations. Thank you all so much for your time today and for accepting our invitation to join us. A reminder to our audience that you are able to ask any questions to our panelists in the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. And with that, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can see you all more clearly. Let's start with hearing a little bit from Rodrigo and then from Jody. I invite you both to introduce your work a bit and your thoughts on the topic of today's session, technology and futures thinking, and perhaps also any initial reflections following Marga's presentation. Rodrigo, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Freya, and thank you, Marga, for this fantastic opening. I'm Rodrigo. I'm a futures researcher and advisor in the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, one of the oldest futures think tanks in the world, founded in the 69. So at CIFS, we help organizations think more rigorously about change and act on it, right? So we do research, scenarios, strategy, and we build the capabilities to do this kind of thinking in-house, right? So this is the core of what we do, and it is what I do day to day, running foresight and scenario projects for public and private organizations, horizon scanning, scenario development, strategic work.
Ooh.
And the other, my role is that I call that. Do you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can now.
Good. That means that for the past couple of years, my job has been exactly the question we'll be circling today, right? So how does a knowledge organization adopt AI without hollowing itself out, right? So we have come to that question from three sides, let's say. We train our own people, we build our own AI tools for foresight work also. And we research what this technology is doing to the knowledge work itself, right? And I will say lately also we bring all of that into how we work with clients, right? So I live in this double condition that this panel is about, AI as a subject of futures thinking, right? And AI as a tool for doing it. And I want to pick up directly on something that Marga said, because I think is the deepest layer of this whole conversation, right? That is what Marga said, the changing fabric of knowledge systems and the distinction between knowledge as a noun and knowledge as a verb. I like to call it like that. So this distinction is exactly where I want to stop, right? So knowledge is something now, something that you do, right? Not something that you have. And AI is forcing that distinction in the way that everyone now has access to roughly the same models, the same tools, right? The same LLMs, GPT, Claude. So knowledge is a noun, the explicit knowledge, the knowledge we can codify, let's say, the stuff that you can write down is being commoditized for everyone at the same time, right? So what is left, the differentiator of knowledge, let's say, is this knowledge as a verb, what we call the tacit knowledge, no? What you learn by doing, by seeing, by learning by mistake, the somatic knowledge, the relational knowledge, right? The gut feeling of a situation, of being written down, no? Which means the models do not fully absorb it, right? Which means it's becoming like the scarcest asset, right? The real is a differentiator. And if we ask ourselves to anticipate which side of the field will change the boundary between the two, right? Because the frontier or the boundary of AI right now is the attempt to reach this basic knowledge, right? The models are learning from meetings, from notes, from call recordings, from all mails. And the line between this cannot be codified yet, right? So the most important thing of knowledge is this tacit knowledge. These radars, like the Mark and the one Marga showed us, which is really interesting. I think they should focus also in tracking this kind of things. And this will be kind of my reflections to Marga's keynote, with what's excellent.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Jody, would you like to share a bit in your reflections as well?
All right. For me, I think what I would share as my personal experience in this conversation is my primary role as in Accenture. So my primary role is I'm a tech practice builder. So I'm responsible for developing the people's talent in the organization, and of course, developing talent in the universities. So like for me, I hire around 500 to 700 graduates every year. So these students go into my organization. And every year, I partner with different universities. So around 20 universities in the Philippines, working with the teachers, their faculty, and the department heads on what to incorporate in their academic programs. So with AI, the main difference between today and like 2 or 3 years ago is the amount of like content that they need to learn earlier compared to like 3 years ago. We're happy to get fresh graduates with engineering background, with IT background, and then we train them with SAP, with Microsoft, or whatever technology is available. But today, the expectation is because of AI, like in Accenture, as consultants, our customers expect us to be experts in AI. So the same expectation also falls to new graduates. So upon graduation, they expect someone, if you're in Accenture, you should know these things, like 5 to 10 things about AI. So all of these things we have to incorporate earlier. And in a way, it's a good thing because we've proven that high school students, college students, they have the capacity to learn more. So beyond the traditional academic programs that were in place before. And by putting some of these things earlier, it also creates opportunities for them. But of course, if you add more into an academic program, then you're sacrificing some of the subjects. And I think this is a big conversation today with our higher education, because there's a push from the government that they want to combine certain subjects like literature, cultural studies, history, ethics. And this is a big debate now in the state of the higher education in the Philippines. But having said that, this is like, as an anticipatory leadership, this is a good topic because we want, of course, to not just survive, but thrive in the AI economy. But at the same time, we have to ask the question, what are we willing to sacrifice in order for us to be able to cope with the speed of technology? So I'll leave it at that, but this is something that I do. And I'm on the business side, so I'm on the side putting more AI topics into the students so they can be more like competitive in the AI global economy. At the same time, I'm also a teacher, so I value the whole well-rounded development of a student.
Wonderful, thank you, Judy. I think let's go into some questions. I want to start us off with a little bit on what these emerging technologies mean, and how do they really change the futures we anticipate. And I think I want to follow up also a little bit on Marga's presentation and ask, are we asking the right questions for the societal implications of technology? Anyone want to start us off? Marga?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were asking me or you're putting the question broadly.
Okay.
Maybe I will I will answer, but also react to Rodrigo. Thank you for kind of clarifying what I said from a different place, which is why I love these discussions. And so the idea that we learn now by making mistakes, by doing, right, and that now every piece of knowledge is available equally to all of us if we know how to find it and using AI the right way, right? So, and how we're going to distinguish ourselves when we all have access to the same baseline knowledge, how we're going to use it to then, you know, create new knowledge careers. So I'm always very, now, especially because we have it's a young leaders program. How are we going to tackle this question of early career? How do you start in a profession when you don't have any more the apprenticeship, the kind of the process where you learn from others, you start from, you know, kind of the foundation, and then you build that expertise over time with, you know, interacting with more senior people, your colleagues, kind of the classic pathway. So how are we going to, so if that layer is changing so dramatically, how are we going to build careers? What does it mean to build a career? What is that even, no, do we need to completely rethink the way we think careers in a kind of that progressive way? So I wanted to just put that back, maybe the question to you. But then in the bigger sense, Priya, in terms of are we asking the right questions? So it's really important that we as a society have agency to decide where is science going. Like, so do we have to accept that, you know, a group of scientists, a group of researchers are deciding for all of us? Because once that technology is going through a threshold, and then, as we were saying, there's no way back because the trajectory is locked, then it is a reduced number of people in the world that decide for all of us, right? And so I'm thinking about, you know, technocracy, or, you know, when technology decides for the future of all, and is this a democratic process? Thinking about representation and legitimacy. Who has elected, you know, big tech giants to fundamentally reshape our society? And is this something that really comes into question and as we evolve also our societies and our democracies? So what is the representativity and the legitimacy for certain actors to decide where is technology going? And now where technology going is where society is going. There's no separation. And this is why we, you know, Anticipatory Leadership, we talk about it in the context of science and technology, because it's really, really, you know, the space where science and technology are not present in the evolution and the transformation is becoming more and more narrow. So everything is so permeated by science that scientists will have enormous power by deciding what to research and what to do with that research. And then who funds that research is the governments, but also the private sector. And so thinking about that new knowledge production ecosystem and how the tech transfer kind of now has, again, escaped the usual sequence where you would have basic science funded publicly in universities, and then you would have a tech transfer process where then it would be commercialized, but at least the early stages will be open, will be peer reviewed, will be kind of published for the world to see, and knowledge still being a kind of a global public good. But now the full cycle of innovation can be done entirely in the private sector without needing this public funding, these universities. So those questions of who decides where technology goes end up being where society goes, where, you know, how the geopolitical reconfiguration of our world is you know, is going to. So I wanted to just put that back and see whether my panelists have any thoughts.
Rodrigo, would you like to share?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Marga. Historically, we almost never fail at anticipating the technology, right? So we fail at anticipating the social and institutional.
Oh, we might have lost you very briefly, Rodrigo.
Political response to it, right? So the most comfortable. Sorry, do you hear me now?
I think yes, now we can. Now we can hear you.
Now? Sorry, guys, for the inconvenience. No, I was saying that we almost never fail in anticipating what how technology will unfold, right? But we fail more in anticipating the social and the institutional and political response to that, right? So the technology itself was predicted reasonably well, right? What almost nobody anticipated was the platforms and the attention economy and the consequences for democracy. The technology is the easy part, right? So the society is the hard one. And on this, I think is a good call for I mean, the question is not asking what will the technology do. So it's more about what will we do with it and who gets left out in all of this, right? So what I believe is that the profiles asking these questions need to change, right? So interrogating and converting technologies requires what we would call like multidisciplinary or generalist or polymaths, right? People that, as Marga said, think systemically and holistic about all of this, right? Because there is so many factors influencing this. And also taking up on Marga's reflection, this organizational design, right, of organizations where we had always this pyramid, right, with loads of juniors at the base, the mid-tier, top management. And we see from the pyramid to the diamond tier with all the juniors is being reduced by AI, right? So we are changing the business model, the value chain, the organizational design, knowledge, skills, capabilities, expertise is really affecting to many forces, right?
Thanks, Rodrigo. Jody, would you like to comment on any of these points at this stage?
Yeah, I would agree. And I feel this every day because, like, Accenture is a global multinational company. So we have around 800,000 employees all over the world. We have 80,000 employees in the Philippines, and we are all impacted by AI. And I think it's easier to teach the young ones with this technology and what it requires for them to make the most of it. And it's more difficult to teach the older ones who are now used to their old ways and the traditional way of doing things. Because I remember, like, I'm just trying to put myself in a young man's shoe. Like 30 years ago, the big difference, the big technological change was from using a typewriter to using a computer. So if you had the typing class like 30 years ago, we are evaluated based on the speed, like the words per minute, and then the accuracy of our typing skills. But with a computer, you can do more than just typing documents. You can create images, you can send messages, you can do spreadsheets. So being able to use a typewriter and a computer will require typing skills, but because the computer opens up more opportunities, you're now expected to learn how to use those different functions. So with AI, the pressure again is for us to learn more of what we can do with this technology. And I'm seeing some questions in the Q&A, like what skills do we need like to learn in this times? Well, for me, like creative thinking is still there, critical thinking is still there, being able to like systematically understand what's happening and being a problem solving, having that curiosity to solve problems and investigate problems. But I think the most important one is being able to evaluate what is right from wrong. I mean, the ethics behind the things that we're doing. As Dr. Marga mentioned, right? Science and technology can lead us like forward, but where do we really want to go? And what are we willing to do and to sacrifice in pursuit of those goals? And that's the big question. Like, are we doing it the right way? Is it ethical to pursue this path? And that really varies. And it requires a lot of dialogue and conversation between different people and countries and communities.
Yeah. Thanks, Jody. I want to follow up on this point a little bit and talk about how do we balance a little bit in terms of pacing. You know, we've been talking about in this series of webinars, this program, we've been talking about the importance of, you know, having these conversations, future thinking conversations, and incorporating the skills into everyone's work, and that how important it is to do this. And if we're talking about technology and responding to the changes and ensuring we're keeping up with the changes, but also ensuring that we have those ethical conversations, how do we find that balance? How should young people think about this? Anyone want to take the question?
Yeah, well, I can take it. I think very aligned with what Joy said, the unit of obsolescence is the skill, not the worker, not the person, right? So we should retire skill sets and not the people, in the way that how we will manage this, as Jody said, judgment, right? Like evaluating the human judgment. This is like the core skill for the AI, the age of AI, right? Is what we were talking before, is the skill or the asset that AI cannot capture, cannot codify, right? This is really, really important. And then you asked a question, Freya, can you repeat that question, the last one?
On how do we find the balance between, you know, the pace. We know we want to respond and adapt to technology as fast as we can, but we also need the pace to ensure that we have those conversations on the ethics and ensure that there's governance and so that it doesn't go too fast.
Yeah. And on that, I wanted to share our personal experience in CIFS, right? For example, we train our people, but we do it based on a framework that has in mind all the human aspects in it, right? So my personal experience, as we were talking, that different people has different expertise depending on age or interaction with technology. We have every person on the team, right? So what we do is progress in a participatory learning experience, right? When you get to train people on AI, you have people that gets bored because they are on top of it and they need to pass to the next step. And then you have people struggling to log in ChatGPT, right? So you have these two different persons that are completely far away from each other, and it's really a challenge to train on that. So my experience says that individual training is the key of this, like to have a very to accompany the person on the learning, and to do it from a very human-centered side, because what is more scary for people is the psychological safety, right? Like, I am giving all this knowledge to the LLM. What about me? What happens afterwards with me, right? So I will say psychological safety and participatory learning throughout all of this experience is key, right?
Yeah,
Thanks.
I
Okay, go ahead.
the balance between the speed of science and technology and the ethical or the guardrails or this governance aspect. So I think the way we do it, as already mentioned, that we put this radar as a global public good. We publish it for everyone to see and for everyone to have access to those early signals as early as possible, to allow that time of thinking about the ethics, for example, or the human rights implication or the geopolitical aspects before it's too late and the technology is already deployed, right? So the way we do this is to bring the stakeholders together through this experiential learning. So I think very similar to you, Rodrigo, and try to imagine what would be like to negotiate in 2045 a new resolution about the ethical aspects of, for example, brain-computer interfaces or synthetic genomes or climate intervening technologies. And so this is the practice. And because it's fiction, everyone can participate. You don't have to be a diplomat. You don't have to have a mandate from anyone. You can participate and engage. So in a way, it's kind of opening up and democratizing that science anticipation in a way. And the idea is that a lot of youth groups are getting really excited about it, and they're starting to take up these tools because they are free and open access, and they start kind of playing with it, right? So these groups can become some of the groups that then go to the have associate with the United Nations in the official negotiation processes. That's there's always a space, for example, for civil society groups, for industry groups that are represented. So even though they are not represented in the way we think they should, and yet because again the intergovernmental processes and the governance process are very much kind of looking at the past models and not really yet as forward looking, but this is the way to make that happen and to transition those inputs into governance from many different parts of the world and many different parts of society. And I think youth groups are really getting super excited about it, and they can start playing with it. And then the conclusions by going through these exercises are very real. These are not fictional. They are real conclusions that they can feed into the governance processes as early as possible. So I think combining science anticipation, but also with other futures organizations that maybe have more structured inputs into governance and future governance is going to be really important. I look forward to kind of cross-pollinating with all the groups that through this program ASEF is really bringing together, because I think combining the angles from our different perspectives can really make a difference. So I look forward to that.
And I think it links on to Jodie's point about having systemic thinking, and sorry, I think Rodrigo also mentioned about generalists, people who have a bigger picture and understanding. We had a whole week also focused on systems thinking and the importance of you are from your individual perspective, but you have to work with other people to be able to understand the system as a whole, and to be able to collaborate and work together to solve things and adjust. Jodie, any comments you'd like to add to this part of the conversation?
Yeah, so like with any technology, and for this one we're talking about AI, of course, like for the Philippines, we're not really we don't have the latest technologies, the proper infrastructure. We're probably lagging in internet speed, but we're probably one of the most expensive in internet pricing. But for some reason, they're calling us, we used to be like the text capital of the world. Now we're called the social media capital of the world. So for some reason, Filipinos like to talk to one another. They like to reach out to other people. They like to we are a consumer of content. I think that's one. We could be creating more content, but yeah, we're participating. So one thing I notice is people find ways if they incorporate technology to their personal lives, to their passions. You find ways to make it useful for you, to make it work for you, and in a way to address or counter or balance the risks. There's gonna be risks, like when you go out in the internet, you might get hacked, you might get bullied or whatever. So there's a lot of risks. Those are real risks, especially for the young ones. But if you take a look at the things that you can do, you can participate in online conferences, you can attend online trainings, education, you can enjoy online content and reach out to other people. And you can connect. And I think that's the real difference today, the connection with other people from different countries, different cultures, different mindsets. So I think it's better for us to reach out, participate, connect with other people, as compared to being victims of our own algorithm biases. If you're just consuming content, you'll probably be getting similar content because that's something that's being marketed for you. But if you reach out and connect to other people, you can get to discuss and, of course, see different perspectives. So in a way to balance so let's not just be consumers of these online digital content, let's also be producers and connectors so we can, yeah, of course, see the world and the bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we talked about the accessibility of knowledge earlier as well, I think that's really connected here, right? In that if we have everything available, but what is new is how another person sees the world, right? And how from their lens, what are the ethical, the human-centered aspects of whatever we're talking about, and from their part of the world, and that's really, really valuable to learn from, and why we do programs like this at ASEF. I'm going to follow up with this with a question from the Q&A, which is on the digital divide. When we're talking about the advancement of technology, we also know that there's a lot of countries and also communities within countries, more rural communities that are being left behind a bit, and basic digital literacy and internet access are still challenges. How can we still have these conversations around technology, around AI, and the importance of literacy, but also ensure that inclusive participation is still considered in all of these conversations, and when we're talking about the future as well? Anyone want to start us off? Margaret?
Maybe I'll start
Yeah.
trying to deepen a point that I think I mentioned in the overview earlier, is about the acceleration of the divide, right? So each new technology brings a deeper divide, and if we don't solve it, it will compound, because then the next technology would add to the existing divide and make it bigger and wider, right? So I think first of all, to acknowledge that each technology is a compounding on each other, so we cannot tackle the digital divide, the internet divide, the AI divide, and then the quantum divide as a separate siloed technologies. It really compounds, because in the end it requires the same infrastructure or data centers and so all of that. I think it's important to think about, I think Rodrigo mentioned technologies as convergent technologies and not as separate agendas or separate portfolios that also belong to different ministries or different, so then that fragmentation doesn't really help, because then, you need to kind of start from the foundation and then build up. And then this, I think the idea of the boundary spanning is going to be really important in terms of skills and how we think of the future leaders, whether we want. So we want to have specialized experts who know a lot about climate technology or about AI or about quantum or about genomics, but then we will need those who are the connectors and the polymaths. I think, Rodrigo, you mentioned, I really like that. So how do we build professionals? And a lot of questions in the chat are about this, right? So I'm trying to also answer. How do we bring professionals who know enough about all of these different technologies to put them together also in a policy aspect, and without having to go too deep into each, to start knowing enough. And this is what we're trying to achieve, that kind of balance in our programs and our trainings. And I think here is the same for you, ASEF, in terms of, what do you need to know about the future of quantum that is enough to then connect it to, for example, the future of health. So, for example, you're going to have quantum algorithms that can accelerate drug discovery, right? So you need to know something about quantum and something about health or how, pharma, like those worlds. And if we keep treating them siloed and separate, we will never find those connections where the real innovation can be. And so maybe put the question back to Rodrigo also in terms of the polymath that you mentioned. So how do you train and develop these profiles that are going to be fluent enough in the tech, but not too deep, because then, you spend all your time doing your research. So you need to be able to also have that kind of T-shape, right? So how do we build these polymaths in the convergence of all the technologies?
Rodrigo, would you like to respond? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really relevant for this point also to understand how we see AI, right? Because what I found more consequential, let's say, is that we keep treating AI as a tool and something you pick and use for a task and put down. And this is how most organizations are using it right now. So we sprinkle AI on top of existing processes and tasks and draft from there, So, but for me, what AI is becoming an infrastructure, right? Like electricity, like the internet, not something you use, something everything runs on through, right? So this is the differentiator and the difference that matters, because you choose a tool, but you inhabit an infrastructure. And once AI is the layer through which we all work, right? And we write, decide, communicate. The question is not like if we should use it, but if we what kind of thinking does this infrastructure make easy, and what kind of does it make hard, right? So on this and based on the question is, we need these polymath environments and holistic approaches, right? And in terms of AI is also biased itself, right? It's North Atlantic and Western, is trained on Western models, right? So we have to stop training AI as these Western North Atlantic models and seeing it as a tool, and start expanding how we use it, how we train it, right? And how we approach it. Exactly that. Stop using it as a tool and start seeing how we can reshuffle the system in some way, right? Reshuffle the system based on the age of AI and how we can work from there and be polymatic. And the most noble knowledge in some way is not in the disciplines itself, is in the link in between those disciplines, right? I think there is where we have to look at, and also linking with the skills, like to look into those links in between disciplines. You need that human judgment. You need that judgment that it's mainly human, that critical thinking that Jody was talking about, the analytical thinking, right? These are the skills of the polymath, of the people that has to ask those questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Rodrigo. Jody, there's a couple of questions there for you to follow up on.
Yeah, I'm just gonna build on the dynamics between technology and regulation. Of course, when it comes to these two, regulation always catches up with the speed of technology. And like we're talking about the early adopters and those who are laggards, then of course the digital divide is whoever is able to adapt first and make the most out of any technology, especially if it's unregulated, they can really take advantage of that situation. And most likely they'll become leaders in that field. And so when this happens, and while we're waiting for the proper regulation to be institutionalized, I think we can still apply the principles of good governance. We can make the leaders of these technologies be transparent in what they're doing. We can we can hold them accountable. And I think that's what's happening now, like with social media, and we can also participate and influence their decision and direction, because as leaders of this technology, they'll probably want to retain that leadership status, but they can only retain that with the support of of course, the rest of the community. And finally, we have to be in the final pillar here is make it inclusive. So we know you're the one leading the way, but we need to bring along the entire human race with us here. So it's not just you. And I think if we still apply this while we're waiting for the proper laws and regulations to be put in place, especially if these are international laws, like for example, it's really difficult for a country like the Philippines to hold Facebook accountable. I mean, these are like the power dynamics is totally different. Unless they have a Facebook entity in the country where we can apply our own legal system, then we can perhaps like put them in a legal situation or jurisdiction, but we are at the mercy of international cooperation between our own legal system and the legal system where Facebook headquarters is located. So these are the things that for technologies that are AI providers, they cut across geopolitical boundaries with different legal systems. So it's really, really complicated. But going back to my point, we can still apply the 4 basic principles of good governance, like the transparency, accountability, the participation, and of course, the inclusive, making this inclusive for others so we can make the most out of this technology.
Thanks,
Can I
Jude.
follow up on this? Because it's really important, Jody, what you're saying. We were a couple of weeks ago in our Geneva Science Diplomacy Week discussing with one of the leaders of Google DeepMind. And we learned that DeepMind, OpenAI, and Anthropic had joined forces to send a letter to the US Congress to update legislation about synthetic DNA and RNA. So synthetic genomes, the sequence that you can basically create in the lab, as we were talking earlier about how easy it is now to make, for example, a bioweapon, right? And so this is companies telling the government that they should update their legislative frameworks. Otherwise, that risk advances much faster. And my question is then, is it really, should have been these companies? So how these companies are accountable to their shareholders, right? So the fact that it's them who kind of raised the alarm that the government should kind of wake up to this new technology, new capability, it's really, really alarming. Is the fact that those same entities who develop the technology and have they are not bound to many of the governance frameworks that we would want them to be. And they are the ones that raise knock the door in Congress or to send letters to the government to say, hey, you should really watch out for this because this has all these consequences. And the same happened with CRISPR in the beginning of the genome editing era, whether we could use this new technology for editing human embryos or not. This was not, there was never a normative framework for it. There was never international binding or not even non-binding, not even soft regulation for it. And in China, actually, 2 babies were born that were genetically modified because there was no global framework that scientists and researchers, but also private sector had agreed upon. So the question is, how do we keep those companies kind of the accountability and the legitimacy to make the decisions and to make the technology that are going to affect us all? And is that the right pathway, that the companies themselves are the ones who raise the alarm? Because that also questions, are they raising the alarm about everything or things that are only convenient to them to share? Because it's a black box, we don't know, it's not open, it's not peer review. And so Hamad was asking in the chat very good questions about all of this, about what happens when science is no longer in the open and we cannot all follow and kind of monitor as it has been for the scientific enterprise until now, that we could kind of raise those bells earlier on and more transparently. And now it's really in that black box and it becomes a decision of a company to say, hey, I'm going to raise the alarm about this, but maybe about other things I will just keep quiet because it is in my interest and my shareholders to continue developing this without a legislative framework that could perhaps stop it. So this is really why, back to the anticipation, these things need to be thought through much earlier than the moment that you write a letter to Congress, because now anyone can order from these DNA synthesizing companies, anyone can order a sequence. Like this is now a consumer product. So how do we do this earlier is the challenge. But I'm curious to, I don't know if you know this story about this letter that it was only 2 weeks ago that was sent to the US Congress, but it's really, I think, illustrative of that speed and who are the ones who know about this and they are raising the alarm. Yeah. And what do they don't raise the alarm about? That's my question.
Exactly. And I think it goes back also to this conversation we had earlier on, are we asking the right questions? And I guess who is asking these questions is the key thing as well. As you say, are they also not asking questions on certain things and asking questions on others? It's a really interesting ethical debate, I think. I want to shift the conversation slightly we've been talking a lot at a societal level, I think, of the implications of technology and technology and futures thinking. At a more organizational and institutional level, of course, all our participants coming from youth or student organizations and are very active in their communities and are trying to learn through this program how to have more futures thinking mindsets, anticipatory mindsets. But when we talk about technology, perhaps, what are a couple of Aksam Mushtaq from the Q&A asks, what are 1 to 2 practical ways to start building, I guess, technology competencies and using technology and understanding, but also particularly using AI in using foresight and futures thinking? What are the skills here that are needed, and how can they start implementing them, but also without losing that critical human thinking? Rodrigo, I know you've done a lot of work on starting to explore using AI in foresight and futures thinking. Perhaps you want to start us off here of what are you recommending as the starting points for youth and student organizations? You're just on mute at the moment, by the way.
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, all good. Or maybe not.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Now do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now you hear me? Good?
Yes.
Good. So yeah, this is of course a very complex question, right? So here I can speak from our lived experience at CIFS, because we spent the last years systemically integrating AI into how we work. So the process was really tough. So we surveyed the whole team. We wrote guiding principles. We trained all the staff in base cohorts. We build these connected tools and internal tools to cover the whole project cycle in where AI can help and where cannot, right? So where AI can help, right? Or how it can help to the foresight practice. First, I will say in horizon scanning is a really helpful part for us, right? So the breadth and the speed that AI can cover, and the signals across languages and domains and formats that no human team could cover, right? This is a very important part for us. But at the same time, the human role stays completely essential, right? We call it human in the loop. So we curate the sources, we challenge the findings and reframe them for context. AI makes a lot of assumptions, right? So it's really important to challenge those assumptions. Second, for foresight, I would say the sense making, and the scenario prototyping, right? AI is very useful as an sparring partner for clustering those signals, generating scenario variations of exploring these second and third order effects in those scenarios, right? So our working principle will be kind of 80-20, right? So we let AI cover the foundational work. So the human time goes where humans add this unique value, right? In the framing, in the judgment, in the conversation with the client. And then I would say another underrated help of AI in here is the consistency and the completeness. AI reduces a lot the risk of simply forgetting about something important when you are consolidating hundreds of signals and interviews, right? So this will be how we use it in some way. But there is some blind spots, of course. The bias towards the past, right? Like the models extrapolate from historical data so much. So foresight exists precisely to look for these discontinuities, right? And AI kind of recombines what exists and is weak at novelty, right? So when you are writing and a scenario is very good at the pattern consistency and identifying patterns, but it's very bad at pattern breaking, right? So the truly disruptive futures, right, are difficult to build with AI. And then another blind spot that we should be aware in some way when we use AI, when we do foresight, is the overconfidence in the first output we receive, right? So what we call the cognitive depth, right? So editing AI text starts replacing the actual thinking, right? So we always need to review the output that are in there. So this is a very overall analysis of how AI enhance and also makes foresight difficult, right?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Rodrigo. Jody, Marga, do you want to add anything on to how youth organizations can start building their capacities a bit better in this area of AI and technology and sort of anticipating and understanding the future and emerging trends that we're seeing? Marga, would you like to start? Or Jody?
Yeah, sure. I would leave you with, of course, the user radar and reader radar and see what's coming, of course, but that not to make too much promo. But I think it's hugely important that in this renewal of the multilateral governance processes and the institutions that have been around for 80 years and right now they are the process of reform. I think I really call for young people and young organizations which are super well structured and sometimes much more energetic and proactive than those kind of much more, let's say, call them not dinosaur organizations, but you get my point, to really get engaged and to really propose new ways of shaping the future and to don't what I like is that there's always a tendency of like when you look at something fresh from kind of free from having too much bias, too much entrenched ideas about how something should be or could be done or look like, you can really come up with these creative new ways of doing. And I think right now this is what we need. We are in a moment that we risk the multilateral system to collapse and to be discarded and dismissed, like, oh, this isn't working. Again, these are dinosaurs, 80 years of an institution. This is not fit for purpose in the future. I think this is hugely dangerous because we cannot have a multilateral, like we cannot have a table that includes everyone. Again, we could not rebuild it from nothing. So because not everyone would come at the table. So it would be impossible to recreate. So what I would love to see is new energy and new ideas being infused into kind of the architecture that we have, but making it fit for purpose. And only this could happen. But only this can only happen if young people come on board. It's not the people who are there sitting for decades in that system that are going to rethink it, reimagine, reinvent it, right? So it's like coming from young people, fresh, who don't have that baggage of having seen this for decades, to say, okay, how are we going to think about governing climate? Is it COPs every year in different parts of the world the best way really to achieve effective climate governance, or there might be other ways? So these other ways that they can not replace, but help re-infuse that energy is what we need. And I think more structured pathways for those ideas to come into the system, again, not to throw away the system, but to allow the space for that new energy and those new ideas to come in. And so from our side at JESDA, we would love to have, we have a youth delegation every year in our summit. So this is one way we try to constantly have those voices of youth integrated, not as participants, but also as shapers of conversations, speakers, really to have them infuse that energy throughout and across the different parts of the organization and our work as well. And so we would really invite those youth, these new kind of ways of looking, these new frames and lenses to look at old problems and bring the new technology and the new ideas and the future thinking to hopefully, save what's good about the system that we've had that kept us together in a multilateral table and bring it to the 21st century and beyond. So this will be my invitation, and hopefully the ASEF, I think, community is crucial for this, and all of the partners that participate in the different programs. It's really an amazing ecosystem to make that happen.
Thanks, Marga. I'm going to add quickly onto this point about the breakthrough radar, because I think when we were talking about understanding systems, the value of having an overview of the emerging technologies and then being able to apply it to your context. All of you participants are from very different, or youth organizations, very different cultures you're working in. You're focused on different topics as well. And if you are working on, for example, climate change, have a look at the radar from that context of climate change and think, okay, these are the technologies that are coming. These are the changes that could happen. How does that affect my work in this area? And that's how you can make those connections, I think. We are a little bit already over time. I was going to say running out of time, but so I want to start wrapping up. I'd like to bring down to one more level lower of the self-leadership, and for a closing thought, what is perhaps an individual action or mindset or takeaway that you think all our attendees today should be going away with when we think about technology and futures thinking? Closing remark. Jody, would you like to start us off?
For me, I think just I've seen that question, like what's the right mindset? Then just enjoy learning something new every day, because as these technologies, like before it was 2-3 years before there's a new version of Microsoft. Now it's like every 3 weeks there's a new patch update of our cloud applications. Whatever you're using today, they're like updating every day or every week. So don't be surprised. Just enjoy and learn as much as you can every day. And for me, the fastest way to learn is to learn together. So ask your friends, ask your families, because these tools, they evolve, and you cannot learn it by yourself. It's easier to ask someone and see what their thoughts and what they learn something new, and then learn from them as well.
Thanks, Jody. Rodrigo?
Yeah, definitely. I will say to lean on these emerging technologies in a meaningful way, together, learning by seeing how others use it, how others do the things is the best way to learn, and to kind of not protect but be aware of their tacit knowledge and the knowledge that stays human, or will be human still, and put the value on that. That's where the value lies in this new world, I will say. So protect it, enhance it, and learn about it.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Marga.
Thank you. I would say keep a sense of agency. I think it's really easy to give in to whatever the future holds for us instead of thinking that we are the shapers of it. So I think keeping that sense of agency, that we can influence what happens, that we are not, passive passengers into some future that someone else is designing elsewhere, to really think that we are the drivers and the shapers of that future. So agency is my keyword.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I wish we could continue this conversation, because I think we could talk for a lot longer. But unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. So thank you so much, Marga, Rodrigo, and Jody, for this wonderful discussion today. Next week, we have a final session, a final open session for people to join us. We are focused on futures thinking in practice. We'll go a little bit more into what are these everyday practices that you can start implementing for yourself, for your teams, and for the sake of society. Thank you all so much for joining us today for today's webinar, and I hope to see you all again next week. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you for the invitation and for the great questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.